Hi, welcome to the Rittner Floral School in Boston, Mass. I'm Dr. Steve Rittner, and it's a pleasure to welcome you into one of our classrooms today. We've got a great lesson planned for you. I know you guys are really going to enjoy it. I know I say that all the time, but I mean it. I do think you guys are going to enjoy it. The time of the year, it's December, Christmas is coming up, and what we thought we would do today is a Christmas design. Now, we can go in many different directions with this holiday. Christmas means many different things to many different people, and there are all kinds of symbols, approaches that we can use. We can go with a traditional look on Christmas. You never can go wrong with that. But what we thought we would do today is something a little bit different. Step out of the box a little bit and come up with something that has a kind of different look to it. And I think you guys may find this kind of interesting. Notice our container. The container alone makes this an interesting design because it certainly has a contemporary and sleek feel to it. We've got it prepped, we've got our foam in place, it's in here very, very solidly, and we're ready to go. And in terms of doing our design today, I think you're going to see that this design is not going to be a conventional Christmas design because we're going to start off, yes, with some heliconia. With heliconia. Who said you can't use tropicals in a Christmas design? Sometimes by using some tropical materials in Christmas designing, it makes it extra special, unique, and different. And you'll notice that with the use of our heliconia, this is big. It's big right from the get-go. I mean, this design is starting off as a fairly large piece, and because the flower itself creates some height to it. Now, what other interesting things can we do with this? Well, I'm going to take some additional heliconia, and just prior to starting, I've taken this and I've broken it down. So I'm going to take some actual pieces of heliconia that I removed from the pods, and I am going to work them in here and work a few in close so that we have another interesting kind of an effect coming in right over here. Now, what other interesting things can we do on this? Well, it is Christmas, and we never can go wrong with our evergreens. Balsam, fir, things like that really, really work so well for this holiday. And so I'm going to take a piece of my balsam fir. I'm going to place it over here. This is definitely going to say holiday. And I'm going to take a second piece of my balsam fir, and I'm going to place it over here. And I'm going to take a third one so that we're definitely getting in the concept of the holiday with some of our materials here that definitely say Christmas. So that's an interesting combo. Now, let's see what other mischief we can get into. Yes, I happen to have some very, very pretty ginger. Let's play with some ginger and work some ginger in here. And so I'm going to place one over here to one side. This is extending our eye out in this direction. Let me take another piece of our ginger and cut it down and work it in a little bit closer. So we have something interesting going on there. And we can also use some of our other kinds of foliages as well as our evergreens. For example, we can take a palm leaf that we've cut down and work that in. That gives an interesting effect. Now, let's see, what else? Oh, yes. You guys know that Dr. Steve loves branchy stuff. If you've watched any of our videos before, you've noticed that I generally tend to work in branchy stuff here and there. So let's take a little bit of curly willow and work in a little piece of branchy stuff into this. This ought to add a little bit interesting flavor to our design and a little more dynamism as this kind of curves around like this. That's going to be an interesting effect. And as I've been adding in my various stems, I do have some cuttings that were taken off the stems, so we can make use of those too. So let's take a stem and actually use the rest. At one time, designers would discard these into the waste, but we're finding today that they're visually interesting, and we can add them into our design and come up with some very, very interesting results. Now let's see, what other mischief can we do on this? Oh, well, we can add some other flowers to it. For example, we don't just have to use tropicals. We can mix them with some of our other flowers. And so I'm going to add a rose right here. And then if one works well, more than one will work even better. So let's add another rose into our mix. There are some designers who've been suggesting recently that the idea of mixing tropicals with everyday kind of flowers is an interesting idea. They even give it a fancy name, Tropical Nouveau. But we've been suggesting mixtures like this for years at Rittner's because it's visually interesting. And why not? I mean, if we can work in combinations of flowers that are unexpected, it gives a very, very neat effect in terms of our designing. And I think that if you keep an open mind on that, these things can really come up with some interesting combinations. Now, let's add something that's definitely going to add to the holiday kind of feel. I've got a cluster of my millimeter balls. I'm going to work some millimeter balls in here. I have it on a pick. Always use these with caution because they are glass and you don't want to cut yourself on them or break them. So I'm going to put a little cluster there. We call this the grape cluster effect here at Rittner's. And then let's take a second cluster of our millimeter balls and work it over here. So we've got two clusters of our millimeter balls worked in towards our focal, crisscrossing with our heliconia on this. Now, let's see, what other mischief can we get into? Again, I like using some of our branchy stuff. We've got a lot of activity going on this side. We have some things going on here with the roses, but I'd like to see a little bit more activity over on this side to kind of balance that out. And in order to do that, I'm going to take a little bit more of my branchy materials, some more of my curly willow, and I'm going to extend this out over onto this side. So I'm going to work a piece of my curly willow coming out over on this side. And I think that adds a little bit more visual weight to the piece coming out over here and gives kind of a nice flow going over it like that. Now at this point, we have some area on the inside of the design that could use some coverage in terms of filling in our mechanics. And to do that, I'm going to take some of my boxwood. Boxwood is a lovely material. We get it at this time of the year. I wish we were using it throughout the year more. I generally say to my students that boxwood, like some of our other Christmas materials, have kind of become typecast, as it were, in terms of use of these things for Christmas. We kind of associate it with the holiday period, and therefore they become kind of a mainstay during the holiday, and we don't really use them as much as we should or could at other times of the year. And you know something? If we want to really make sure that we're saying Christmas, to me Christmas also means the use of things like pine cones. So I'm going to work a pine cone in right here, in close, and then I'm going to take another pine cone and work a second pine cone into my design. Again, taking it and extending it out. I have some heavy wire holding it, and I put it onto a pick so I can kind of extend this down over on this side, and that gives me an interesting effect over coming over like that. Now, in terms of finishing the design off, obviously, I might want to put a little bit of either moss or some of my boxwood over onto the other side. But I think you can see this gives a really, really interesting visual effect to my design. Now, this is very contemporary in feeling. There's lots of negative space worked in here. We've got some very interesting things going on in terms of bringing our eye in through the design at different angles. But I think you can see, my viewer, I didn't use a huge amount of stuff. One heliconia, 3 roses, a couple of pine cones, a couple of ginger, a few pieces that I clipped off of a heliconia, and we've got a very, very interesting thing, our millimeter balls, a little bit of the foliage, both in terms of our balsam fir and also our boxwood, along with a palm leaf that we cut down. It gives a very, very neat effect. There's one other thing I'd mention on this that I think is worth talking about. We're showing this as a contemporary design. It's a big design. This could go in an entry area, could go in a bay window. It would work very, very well on a sideboard, but it's a fairly good sized one, and it is being presented as something a little bit more contemporary in feeling. There's one other thing you could do if you wanted to have some fun with this, and some people like this kind of an effect and some people don't, but I'll mention it for what it's worth. I can take a couple of little googly eyes and place them like so, and because of the nature of my container, now it feels almost like we've got a variation on our snowman effect. Now, some people like that effect, some people don't. I think it depends on how you want to handle it, but I like sometimes to take things and present them as novelties. Now it looks like a snow person with kind of a wild hat that it is wearing. So we could go that route if we wanted to, or we could just leave it as a contemporary design. So what do you think, my viewer? Quick, easy, and fun. The Rittner Floral School way. Again, I'm Dr. Steve Rittner. On behalf of all of us here at Rittner's Floral School, thank you for coming into our classroom today. We hope you enjoyed this lesson. Thank you.